when people laugh, they lean in. They're more receptive. They're more engaged, so they're more likely to remember what you're saying. So if you're trying to teach something, that's a fun way to use comedy. And I'm not saying like a killer, hilarious joke that's going to be on Netflix. It could be a silly wordplay. It could be something self-deprecating. There could be a reference to something that happened earlier in your delivery or something earlier in the conference, like just like a callback is what that's called. One of the questions I ask on my podcast is, what's your worst bombing story? Because everyone at every level has just crazy bombing stories. So
one of the questions I like to ask on my podcast ever since 45 seconds ago is, what is your favorite bombing story?
a callback. Look at that.
And here we go. What's up, everyone? Today we have on the show none other than my friend, the hilarious Joel Byars. Joel, welcome to the show.
Let's go. Thanks for having me, Mitchell. I'm super jazzed about this.
Of course, man. So am I. And there's a lot of things I want to talk to you about. But I guess first, for the audience, let's give them a little sneak peek of who Joel Byars is. So you're a comedian, you're a creator, an entrepreneur, you're the host and the CEO of Hot Breath Comedy podcast and YouTube channel. I'm sure I'm missing other things. Who is Joel Byars? Did I miss anything?
I mean, yeah, all those things really check the boxes. Husband, dog father, all the fundamentals. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing comedy 13 years, been doing my podcast 7 years. And I just love connecting with people like you who are business minded, because there's so many parallels between like the comedy world and just the business world, entrepreneurship and all of that I don't think people really get to learn a lot about. So I'm really excited to dive into that today.
Yeah, I agree. I'm curious, do you think of yourself as a comedian, as an entrepreneur, as a trophy husband?
Yeah, that one, I definitely would have to say entrepreneur. And that's something that I wish I kind of thought of earlier in my career, of like thinking business minded, because it is show business. So it's two jobs. It's developing a show, getting good at the craft, and also developing as a business, having a product worth selling, understanding who your audience is, and really creating in that direction. So I definitely am 100% an entrepreneur and always looking for different streams of income, even beyond comedy or podcasting, and always looking to see what is happening in not only the comedy industry, but other industries, and what are the parallels that I could pull and kind of adapt into my own endeavors.
Interesting. So what would you say are like kind of like fundamentals of your business if you're looking at it? I know you got the YouTube stuff. I think you have like a comedy school maybe. How do you look at it?
Yeah, it really, and especially during the pandemic, like it really escalated that entrepreneurship mindset, because basically leading up to the pandemic, I was a road comic. I was on the road headlining shows. I just released a self-produced comedy special called The Trophy Husband, and I was ramped up to go on this Trophy Husband comedy tour, and literally overnight I'm unemployed, and basically I had all my eggs in one basket. I had been doing the podcast, interviewing comedians, but never looked at like the financial side of it, the business side of it. So during the pandemic, it forced me to pivot and really get creative with how I do approach my business. So there's so many different aspects. Like you said, the online comedy school, the podcast, the YouTube channel, even I've done coaching. I'll do corporate events in terms of I'll perform stand-up, but I'll also do team building with corporations with like improv. And speaking of the YouTube channel, a company actually saw the YouTube channel and hired me to basically do a joke writing workshop with them. And it was like a 2-hour team building workshop where they got into teams and worked together to write a single joke. And it was a lot of fun, and it was something that I didn't expect when I started the podcast, the YouTube channel, that, there's actually a lot of real world application to understanding comedy beyond just standing on stage and telling a joke.
Interesting. So it was purely a a team building exercise. Was it like like what type of company was it?
So it was called Wreck It, and they work. It was like their sales team, and they really work with like the big box stores on like shelf space, and it's very
So
analytical and
nothing to do with comedy at all. They were just using comedy as a tool for team building.
yeah, nothing to do
Interesting.
with comedy at all. Yeah.
And they just found you via your YouTube channel. Were you advertising like, yo, this is what I do, hit me up? Or they were just like, hey, we think you'd be good.
Yeah, they were just impressed with the quality of the content and thought it could be an interesting for one of their offsites. They thought it could be an interesting kind of spin to really spice it up because something people don't understand with
Mm.
laughter is it's like there's like a cocktail of like chemicals going on every time you laugh. I mean, there's dopamine released, it lowers your cortisol, it raises your serotonin. Like when people are laughing, they're more receptive to information. So there's a lot of like practicality to laughter and understanding that if I'm teaching them how to write a joke, like we do a recap at the end where it's like, okay, now what are like you learned how to do this, but what are the real world applications of like how does this parallel to your own everyday workflow? And it was very effective, and I'm excited to do more.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that like cocktail of chemicals because it's something I've thought of. This is why like I'm I love the work you do and a lot of other comedians. And the thought is like, how do we bring this more into just like regular, maybe like more boring businesses? And the chemicals literally, it's like it not only will really like release dopamine, endorphins at like runner's high. It also reduces cortisol levels and just like expedites connections, whether that's new people or like current people that you work with. So it's like literally if that was like a medicine, like that would be a miracle drug, right?
Yeah.
But it's available to all of us. So I'm curious, how many times a day do you laugh, do you think?
Well, there's
I think
one.
we've had like five at least in just a couple minutes here.
But that's the best part is it's like there's a study that's like the average kid laughs 300 times a day, the average adult laughs 15 times a day. So one of my goals in my corporate workshops is, okay, in this time slot, I want to make sure people laugh at least 15 times, and we get like that quota. But yeah, I'm laughing as much as possible, honestly. And fortunately, my business is something I do enjoy. So even if something doesn't go well, I kind of have a reflex now to laugh it off. Now, I'm not like perfect, and there's highs and lows just like with anything else. But I do try to be mindful of the application of laughter that even if something isn't great perceptibly, you can still laugh it off and you'll actually feel better about it. So yeah, I try to laugh as much as possible.
Yeah, so that's so funny. The pun intended, maybe. The so I put a handful
There's
of
two laughs.
like things I'm curious about in this doc, but one of the things I didn't put was the thing that you actually just rattled off, that study of, they call it like the humor cliff of people who like as soon as you start working, there's a graph. I almost tweeted it this morning, but like I didn't have anything funny. I wanted it to be funny, and I didn't know how to do that. So maybe you can help me. But basically, like right when you entered the workforce, like 23 years old up until you're 70, they asked a bunch of people like, did you smile or laugh yesterday? And like everyone would say yes, all the way up until 23, and then it dips all the way down until 70, like until like we're dead, right? And so and then the stat too that I found was like the average 4-year-old laughs 300 times a day, and the average 40-year-old laughs 4 times a day. So kind of like what you like, even crazier than what you said about that 15. But
Yeah.
it's interesting that you incorporate that in. It was like, all right, well, what if I just get 15 laughs, within early in the set, and that's something that you sort of like optimize for, it seems. But it also is like just part of your I don't know, your product is you are delivering this joy and like that the cocktail of chemicals.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting all these studies coming out now that like it's scientifically proven to improve productivity, to build trust within the workplace. Like there's so much research around laughter now proving that it can actually create a competitive advantage. It's not just a fun event to have, but it can
Mm.
actually be like a differentiator.
I was trying to think of as I was like gathering this information, it's like, oh, this is sort of what I've thought of. Oh, I used to be, growing up, love. I mean, I still do love comedy, but like, especially back then, I was thinking early on of like, I don't know, maybe like, I started to list them out, like anything from prank TV shows or like crank yankers to what I was trying to like understand or figure out for myself is like, okay, we all have this thing that we all loved as kids. Then we become adults. How do we insert that back in? One of the small things I've done is I just have like a laugh or funny YouTube playlist. It's just like a private playlist where I have like, I don't know, the funniest parts of Hall Pass or Super Bad or Forgetting Sarah Marshall or like stand up stuff or like, I don't know, just funny like videos. And 10 times out of 10, like I open that up, I click something and like I laugh like at least I probably fill my quota at least 4 times and I'm not even 40. And but I'm curious like how a lot of people have these, are in jobs that aren't maybe comedy and maybe it's not normal to insert that in there. Like any idea how to like approach that? Like how do we laugh more?
Well, I think lowering the bar also helps because I think people think of comedy and being funny as either you have it or you don't. It's like either you're this amazing professional comedian or you just don't have humor. I do believe that like humor is our sixth sense. I do believe everyone has it within them. So I think easy ways to insert humor is if you honestly just smile more at the workplace. Like it can be something as that simple. It's not like an LOL, laugh out loud, rolling on the floor laughter, but it is bringing joy. And if you're smiling more, people will mirror that and they'll start to smile more and it just gets the ball rolling. That's why a lot of times on stage, unless the comedian's persona is like to be angry and edgy, comedians will smile more because a smile is like halfway to a laugh. So even just something as simple as smiling more at the workplace can start to open up more opportunities for laughter. Putting a funny GIF in your email is another funny thing you can do, or like a meme or something like there's just little things. I think people hear comedy and laughter and think, "Oh, it's got to be this amazing belly laugh." It could literally just be like, "Huh," or just something they notice that is kind of like a pattern interrupt within their day that brings that little hit of dopamine that can really set a big momentum forward.
Pattern interrupt. Yeah, I want to talk more about the structure and styles too, but I just pulled up my list. I was going through last night of like things early on in my life that I would like watch or just really like oh, that stuff's awesome. So I'm gonna rattle off a couple that I'm curious some of yours. For me, like Jackass, the Ali G show, SNL, like any pranks, Chris Rock, Adam Sandler, any of his like movies or songs, Seinfeld, Robin Williams, Jim Carrey, Will Smith, Dave Chappelle, Wedding Crashers, Superbad, Whose Line Is It Anyway, Family Guy, Simpsons, South Park, Tom Green, Weird Al Yankovic, Aziz Ansari, Bo Burnham, the Bob and Tom show, which is like a radio show I used to listen to back in the day. So those are a handful. I'm curious for you, when did you decide comedy, and what were some like the bigger influences for you?
Yeah, that's a great list. I think the only one you left off was Joel Byers, but that's all right.
Oh yeah, I have that one at the bottom. And this was more of like formative, growing up, and then
Oh yeah, good point.
the current list just says JB, the one and only JB.
Yeah, that's a killer list. I mean, the comedian that inspired me to pursue comedy was Sinbad. He was the first comedian I saw on TV, and he was wearing like a jumpsuit, a crazy colored jumpsuit, and he was bouncing around and always just having fun on stage. I love all types of comedy, but I definitely gear towards more like the silly, goofy, playful, like a Sinbad. Steve Martin is my favorite. Just people who just have fun with the form and really can just kind of make it their own. is really where I get my favorite comedic inspiration. But there's so many. I mean, even movies. Will Ferrell, Old School, was a game changer for me. Superbad was another one. Breakfast Club. I think that's another good movie too. Like I'm kind of all over the map when it comes to inspiration because I'm always drawing from different styles of what they're doing that maybe I could kind of tweak and make my own. Jim Carrey as well. Yeah, just the fearlessness of him and like a Robin Williams. Like I really get attracted towards like just the comedians that are just uniquely themselves and have really found their own lane in the game, which is what I'm working on doing.
Yeah, and I guess speaking of drawing inspiration from others, you've, I think, interviewed over 400 people on your podcast, 400 comedians. Any notable names there, or like what stands out the most? That's a lot of comedians, and you've had some like famous comedians on there.
Yeah. And speaking of weird, Bo Burnham, he's another guy who's like created their own lane. So I've had
Totally.
Bo Burnham on there, Jeff Foxworthy, Andrew Schulz, Cedric the Entertainer. Goodness, yeah. There's a lot. There's it's been. Yeah, it's quite a catalog. I want to turn it into a book.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot that could be easily digestible into like a book because there's a lot going on. In the podcast.
Yeah, how did you get like Andrew Schulz or some of these big names?
It's so interesting that like each guest has kind of been a different approach. Like some people I hit up on social media, other people, and then they were like replied and said yeah. Other people ignored me on social media, so I went to their show, talked to them that way. And some people reached out to me. I mean, Bo Burnham was a milestone interview in that his team actually reached out to me about him being on the show. And that was a really cool moment of like, oh, we're on the right track here. You know, I think in anything we're working on, it's like a lot of heads down. Maybe you feel misunderstood or underappreciated because you just keep on this weekly grind every Monday at 8 a.m. New podcast. That those are the kind of moments that have kept me going when it's like, oh, people are noticing this and it is working. It's just maybe not working, quote, as fast as I want it to or as fast as my wife wants it to. But it's each one has been completely different though. Sometimes it's been a referral from another guest I've had on. Cedric the Entertainer was his opener, came on the podcast, and I think what has really helped is putting out a quality interview, like a quality show that people do want to share and do want to refer me. Like I'm a private investigator with my guests. Like I go deep on research. Like I want these interviews to be like, all right, if I want to know everything about this comedian and how they got to where they are and their process, I know if I go to Hot Breath, it's going to be almost like a synthesis of all their interviews into this one quality interview. So I put a lot of thought and time into not just the production side, but like the preparation side of these interviews.
Yeah, and I've watched a good handful, and one in particular. You have some. I learned so much with a few of your interviews with the Joke Doctor, as he's called, and so like specifically on like deconstructing comedy, call it like, you know, I'm like, oh, I like comedy. I just like laughing. I haven't really thought about the fundamentals of it or the mechanic, kind of like we were talking about earlier a little bit. And so he was explaining, I think, how there's 9 laugh triggers from like surprise and embarrassment to 13, I think it was, structures, whether it's like an observation or a double entendre, compare and contrast, that sort of thing. Do you think in terms of like structure and triggers, or do you just look for funny? Like where do you draw the line there?
Yeah, the Joke Doctor's great. I mean, he's been such like a good friend to have in this industry, and his content is amazing. And I always get feedback on his episodes because he always just drops sauce on those episodes, you know, especially for like the comedy nerds and people looking to get into like the fundamentals. Like for me personally, like he has like the 9 laughter triggers and like the 13 psychological and all of that fun stuff. But for me and how I operate, I really just started really the most structure I learned was like the one-liner joke. Like starting out, I learned how to write a one-liner and kind of starting to build my act from there. I didn't get all into like, all right, here's a list of all the 9 different things. Like, I think as we go back to the 400 interviews I've done, I think one of the big takeaways is that from interviewing so many comedians is there's no like right way. There's really like your way, and it's you can learn from a bunch of different people, but you adapt it to make how it works for whatever your creative system is. So for a lot of people, those 9 laughter triggers, people, oh, I can write jokes all day doing that. Other people, it's like, oh, that makes me overthink it. That makes me feel more formulaic. So then I perform it a little more robotic. So it doesn't work for them. So it's kind of a plug and play thing. You kind of learn and then make it your own, essentially. But for me, that one liner is kind of that's like the fundamental. That's like the joke, that setup, punchline, misdirect. That is really just like the fundamentals of writing a joke. And when you can understand that mechanism, then you can start to apply it to bigger things beyond just like a simple one-liner joke.
Yeah, totally. What is I'm curious, like your writing routine. Are you sitting down and carving out time, first time in the morning, or are you just like randomly when you get inspiration or when things hit? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I'm always looking and thinking about jokes. I'm always like looking for stuff. So I have a Google Doc of like joke ideas and stuff that I'll keep track of if something pops in my head that may be funny or interesting. But my actual routine, I do like I call it like the right 60 and I just set a 20-minute timer. It's like the Pomodoro technique of I just start the timer and I write for 20 minutes, and when it goes off, I can either keep going or I can take a little break. But I always get in that like 60-minute time block. And a lot of it, like honestly, like writing is a muscle, and it's like the more you write, the more chances you give yourself to find a joke at the end of the day. Like the ratio of joke writing, like what you get rid of versus what you keep, literally it's like 1 out of 10, a lot of times 1 out of 20 jokes you'll actually end up keeping. That's why these late night comedy shows, they have a team of professional writers who are like trained to do nothing but write jokes. And there's a team of them writing all day for like a 5-minute monologue. Like right. they're going through hundreds of jokes to get to these. So it really is a process of writing. So for me, I may just start off journaling. It can be something as simple and low bar as that, just to get the momentum going. It could be me reviewing a set that I did the night before or recently. It could be me just reading back on what I've written recently. So I just know that I have to sequester myself and be like, for the next 60 minutes, you can either sit here and not write or write. Like those are basically the 2 options. No social media. Like I really just have to like shut it down. And a lot of the times I may not find anything, but I have found that even just doing that process, I'm more productive when I do perform. So even if I don't find a joke about a certain thing while sitting here, I may find it on stage later that night because my brain is just kind of always like kind of churning around and thinking of these things. And the subconscious will just bring out these ideas at the most random times.
Right. So it's almost like what I think so interesting about the parallels between joke writing is it applies to other things too. Overall writing is the same way, right? It's like people, famous writers will say that it's more about editing than it is writing. You put out a bunch of stuff, you write a bunch of things, and then, hardly anything is worth keeping, but that's how you get to the good stuff. Or I've always liked like the creativity faucet concept that Ed Sheeran and a few others will talk about. It's just like, as with anything, like you turn on the water, and then like the dirty water comes out first, but you just got to let it run for a little bit, and then you get to the good stuff. Same with writing, same with entrepreneurship, right? If you just sit down and focus on the business or try different projects or experiments, eventually you get to the good stuff. So it's like, I think Seinfeld calls it just a game of tonnage, where you got to sit, show up each day, every day. And so the more and more I've thought about writing and also business, it's like, okay, it's less about, oh, you just found this great opportunity or you got lucky here. It's just like, pick the thing that doesn't feel like work to you, and it's actually fun to like go through the process versus like, oh man, I wish I get lucky and find a joke today, because that's not really how it works.
Yeah, it's like law of averages. I mean, you just do it a lot, and then you'll eventually find something, and then you hold on to it and build it out from there. Because, I mean, finding a YouTube idea. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, all right, how many ideas? Well, let's do 50 ideas. Okay, now let's do 50 title and thumbnail ideas for that one idea out of 50. Like, it's all, like, yeah, everything to get to, like, the refined quality end game. Like, it requires a lot of just being willing to, yeah, like, crawl through the mud.
So your process, it sounds like every day, block off an hour, no like social media or anything, and then within that hour, you'll break it into kind of 20-minute sprints, 3 20-minute sprints.
Yeah, and I have to do it in the morning. Like, it's kind of like working out for me. Like, if I don't do it in the morning, I'm most likely not going to do it. So, and then I would catch myself like beating myself up throughout the rest of the day. Oh, I still have to do this thing. Like, if I don't do it in the morning, then I just like release it, and I'm like, okay, I didn't do it today. Like, but like,
so it's not hanging over you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
But it can be something as simple as journaling. It could be if I have a joke ideas or something I'm working on. Okay, how can I build this out? How can I find new angles, points of view on this joke? How can I? Are there other funny parallels between this? It's really just like a lot of tinkering. Like, I have some tools I use. A Venn diagram is something I really enjoy doing. If I have two maybe like seemingly dissimilar ideas, I'll use a Venn diagram to look at the parallels and differences between these two concepts and see if I can find some funny connections there. There's a mind map thing as well, where you put like a word or topic in the middle, and then you can kind of start to branch out different connections and associations you think of when you hear that thing. Because comedy really hinges on surprise. So whether it's a surprise in a setup punch misdirect, or it's a surprise in connection that you can create, it really all comes from that surprise, which evokes that laughter.
Right. And I think for like one of the things I've noticed as I'm trying to like, I'm just interested in it as like an art form, and kind of like the benefits that we talked about earlier. But like when our brains, who are not used to, your brain works as like, okay, I know I want this misdirect, so I'm going to set up this Venn diagram, and I'm going to take two dissimilar ideas and like poke at how, they both would work independently, but it'd be funny together, that sort of thing. Whereas I think for the rest of us, we're not wired like that, right? We're wired to be like, oh, what is just expected, because that's how, we don't think of the unexpected always. Do you think that writing jokes is like, I don't know, available to everyone, or everyone should try this? Or like, what would you recommend for people who are kind of interested in this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a puzzle. Like, it really is. It's almost like doing a Wordle or something. Like, you really do. And that's something with like the joke writing workshop I do for the companies, is I break it down into like a 5 steps to funny formula, where it's like a lot of brainstorming, and then it's picking an idea or topic. All right, what do you want to say about this topic? That's the premise. All right, what is the setup of the joke? Okay, what are people thinking when they hear this setup? Okay, how can we flip and misdirect that assumption to create this surprising punchline? So there's like a step-by-step process you can do to like actually create a joke from nothing, or just a mundane topic, and really structure it into, I'm setting up the audience to think in this direction, and then the punchline creates a surprising second direction, a misdirection.
Right. And so, yeah, I guess I've gathered like ideas or something, like, oh, there might be something here of like different premises, and then I haven't fully gone through, how to, like, is there something here? How do I make this funny? And so it'd be I'm curious. Are you open to workshopping some ideas to write a joke live?
Yeah, let's do it.
You have on your YouTube channel like writing a joke in 10 minutes, which is really helpful to see you. You just like share your thought process as you go through. 10 minutes is very quick. It might even be quicker here. So whether or not we flush it out completely, or just walk through how you would how you would break it down.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple here. I
Ooh.
have one where so I'm learning Spanish. I'm trying to learn. Estoy aprendiendo.
Sí,
Um,
claro.
and oh yeah, you speak some Spanish too. Nice. This one of the tools that that I've been using is it's called SpanishDict.com, and so it's Spanish like dictionary, but the Spanish dictionary must have been taken, so this is just DICT.com.
Uh-huh.
And I started to like think, oh, like that's that's kind of a funny word, right? You're like
Right.
Spanish dick.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I don't know, like maybe there's something there. It was like, Spanish was really challenging for me. It almost like what I was thinking of, like it'd be a funny like ad read, or say that Spanish Dick is sponsoring this podcast, and Spanish was always challenging me until I found my Spanish Dick, and now like whenever I'm in a tricky situation, like I just pull out my Spanish Dick anywhere I go, and the like I feel like there's a few different situations of like people used to look at me crazy, but now I pull my Spanish Dick. I don't know, like you get like there's something there maybe, but like I don't know what to do with it. Will you help me with my Spanish Dick, Joel?
Oh, we're hitting that quota. We're definitely getting the 15 in on this one. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I don't even have to go to the gym. My abs are I'm getting my core workout right now.
Well, yeah, that's funny. So see, maybe you don't understand joke structure, but you're like, oh, there's something funny there. I see like a word play going on with like Spanish dick that could be like dictionary, or could be like a dick joke, basically. So even
Dick joke. I wasn't even thinking of that.
I love that your first joke, you're like, oh, let's do a dick joke. That's basically how all comedy starts. So you're a natural.
Not only starts, it also ends there too.
Yeah. So even just something simply structural is like how you said, I pull out my Spanish dick everywhere I go. You want to end on the punchline. So even if you just flip the punchline to be everywhere I go, I pull out my Spanish dick. Now it ends on the actual punch word. A lot of times people try to say the punchline and then keep talking, but comedy is actually, it's not a monologue, it's a dialogue. It's like the comedian says something, the audience's laughter is their response. So there's like a real rhythm to you talking and then the audience responding. So if you say the punchline and then keep talking, they're not going to laugh as much because they're going to try to hear what you're saying next. So ending on that punch word is always a good place to start when you actually do have a joke. So that's just a fundamental thing there. But I think you're onto something there in terms of it being kind of interpreted in two different ways. That can be a great way to write a joke of, oh, this word can be seen as X, but it can also be seen as Y. So I honestly, I don't hate it. I don't know if this is where I get canceled, and then in 5 years they're like, Joe Byars said he's Spanish dick, and then like all my church gigs go away, and they're like, he's a sinner. But I honestly, I don't hate that, Mitchell. I think you're onto something there. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'll be the one to protect you from that. Cancel me, not Joel. My church listenership isn't as strong. I have more people from the temple than the church, and I think they're good with that. The Spanish dick,
I just had to say that
I'm sure there's
like a youth pastor, so I had to say, I have to fill that, check that box every time.
Yeah, of course. So essentially, this particular example was like taking something like, oh, this seems kind of funny. That will be the punchline. Versus another entrance into it is like, oh, this is just an interesting observation. What is the punchline? So it's always kind of playing with those two chords of observation or premise and punchline delivery. Is that kind of how you look at it?
Yeah, and the premise is basically like, what are you trying to say in this joke? Like, if you were to summarize this joke in like a single phrase, what are you trying to say here? Because a lot of times a joke doesn't work because like the premise isn't clear or whatnot. So for this one, I mean, basically you're looking at a word play on the word Spanish dictionary. But if you're trying to think of something about like marriage, it's starting with, okay, what is your opinion on marriage? Do you love marriage? Do you hate marriage? Is it marriage confusing to you? Like if you only have start with an emotional connection, that can start to be kind of your guiding light towards like, okay, well, how do I set them up to think I love marriage? And then the punchline actually expresses that I hate marriage. So like there's actually a premise to the setup of the joke and a premise to the punchline of the joke. And that's how you can start to find like that flip.
Right,
Does
because
that
it's
make
all
sense?
like you said about, yeah, all like you said about this like misdirection of
Yep.
that surprise of like, oh, I thought he was going here, but he went back over here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. I heard one of you talked with one of your guests about, and they rattled off like, oh yeah, like Brian Keeley, he's the head monologue writer for Conan O'Brien. And I thought it was interesting that most people don't know who Brian Keeley is, myself being one of them. We don't know the writers in the room. We know Conan O'Brien. Same can be said about, any other comedian, but like, in that actual, the joke doctor, I think he's written a lot of jokes for Chris Rock and some of these other big names. Do you, like when you're watching something, are you like, oh, this is funny, who's writing these jokes? Like if it's a TV show, for example, like will you look up joke writers, or are you just enjoying the art form of comedy?
Yeah, I'll look up like in the credits or whatnot. I've definitely checked the credits to see if like I knew anyone on like the writing staff or anything. But I don't think I've ever looked at a writing staff or like a thing and then be like, oh, let me go look up the writers and like seek them out. I haven't done anything like that, but I have checked to see if like I know any of the writers.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been watching Ted Lasso, and
Yeah.
like a couple months ago, I just watched from the beginning, and then it just so happens to be season 3. It was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Like the writing is interesting. It's like I was almost wanting like a Shazam for comedy, because I
Yeah.
feel like some of it's so quick that like I didn't even get it. I had to like look that up. I'm like, I didn't get that, but I'm sure it's funny. And so I'm wondering if you kind of do the same thing where it's like, I don't know, before I was interested in writing and stuff, I'd just be like, oh, this is enjoyable. And then now I'm kind of like, oh, this is enjoyable because the dialogue is so quick and it's clever how they did this misdirection or whatever. It's like almost like deconstructing it a little bit versus just like, be like, oh yeah, that's a good show.
Yeah, I'm definitely more mindful of like story and how they incorporate the not only the character arcs and the story arc, but how they incorporate humor into like serious topics and things like that. I think it was a writer on John Oliver who said that the humor is the last thing they do. Like they need to make sure that what they're talking about holds up just as like a story, just as like content. And then the humor is actually the last thing they add. And I can tell that with personal experience with I'll write for like ad agencies. I'll do like projects with them of them trying to write ads, like funny ads for companies. And it all starts with, okay, what are their customer struggles? Okay, what are we selling here? Okay, what is the point of this ad? What are we trying to get across? And you have to address all of those before you figure out how to put humorous spins on them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's like also similar to sometimes when so I write on my blog and in newsletter, and if I'm trying to relay something, like an overall story or point, like there's sometimes opportunities for micro like learnings or lessons. So it's like as I'm telling the big thing, like if I could like subtly teach you something along the way, or like a quick hack of like even if it's like in a joking manner of like, oh, I could just go to sheets.new or docs.new, and open a new tab. And like people might not know that you could do that. That's like kind of a shortcut for opening a new Google Doc or Google Sheet or something. And so it's like, that's just a random example, but you're like teaching within the teaching. And with comedy, you're saying you still have an overall story that you're doing, but you're inserting these little micro laughter points. Maybe even, if it's an actual set, then it is like the overall story is funny, but then you also have the micro lessons of like laughing points too.
Yeah, and even like horror movies will use humor as like a release valve. Horror movies can like build tension and maybe have something funny happen that then releases a little bit of the tension and they ramp it up again. A powerful like teaching technique is like you say something funny and then deliver like the concept you're trying to say. So if you're trying to teach a point, saying just a funny throwaway line and then delivering that point, when people laugh, they lean in. They're more receptive. They're more engaged. So they're more likely to remember what you're saying. So if you're trying to teach something, that's a fun way to use comedy. And I'm not saying like a killer, hilarious joke that's going to be on Netflix. It could be a silly wordplay. It could be something self-deprecating. There could be a reference to something that happened earlier in your delivery or something earlier in the conference. Like just like a callback is what that's called. But just a little thing to kind of light up that and get that little dopamine release to make people like lean in more.
Yeah, I always appreciate a good like clever callback, just because they're so situational, right? Do you have any just like overall go-to jokes or icebreakers like that kind of hit well usually, or that you revisit, or do you try to not do that?
Yeah, for sure. And I was just gonna say, even in like your emails, even how you use emojis, like it's just something. It's like something that's like it stands out. It's a little bit of a pattern disrupt, and it's something that can kind of like it gives people maybe a little flutter. It may not be like drop dead hilarious, but it's something fun and playful. And I feel like that's all in the same family of laughter. Even just something like that. It's something I've noticed in like your emails, how you like incorporate those in there stylistically. So I think that's impactful as well. But I mean, one thing, as a comedian, when you're out and about, people, if family gatherings or whatnot, they'll always say, "Tell me a joke" or whatnot, and it's usually someone who's a little more like boisterous or whatnot. So I always just say, "I can't think of anything funnier than your shirt." That's something I started saying. I just roast them because it's usually someone who's a little more outgoing. Is like, "Oh, well, tell me a joke, funny man," and I just kind of roast them and then move on to the deal.
Tell me a joke, clown.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one I'll go to. But I mean, in like my workshops, the joke I use as an example of like that 5 steps to funny is, comedy is a dream job if you hate money. So that's like a simple one-liner that sets up the audience to think in one direction and then creates like a surprising misdirect there.
Yeah, and like in general, do you try to lean more towards self-deprecating humor versus others? Like obviously, if the guy is like, "Tell me a joke, clown," like sort of thing, that's a little bit of like, "Oh, you asked for it." But like it feels easier and lighter just to like kind of make fun of either like something neutral or yourself or something.
Yeah, I mean, I just like to keep it clean, basically. So the Spanish dict was really right up my wheelhouse there. But
Yeah.
but you see, even that, it's like it's a way to do maybe a seemingly dirty topic, but you do it in a clean way, like a playful way. It's like a wordplay. It's not just like hammering it home. It's like a wordplay thing that you can do it more nuanced. But yeah, for me, I mean, I've always been a clean comedian. I do clean comedy, so that's like kind of the thing I'll put my material through. That's like a filter I'll put it through. If it's like, okay, can I do this joke at a comedy club and it still work at a college, or it still work at a church, or it still work at like a corporate holiday party and things like that. I am mindful of writing material that does have application beyond just like one singular show. But I mean, dude, I came up in Atlanta as like white boy Joel. I did all the hood rooms. Anytime they needed a white person, I was the diversity hire of the shows. I did strip clubs. I did shady nightclubs, public buses, sidewalks. Like, I mean, I was in the trenches. So so we ain't new to this. We grew to this, fam. So it's
that's right. So we're a family friendly show as well. We advocate Joel practicing safe sets.
Yeah, let's go. There we go. There we go.
One of my favorite things that you do is like some like whether it's like clips or stories, but yeah, when you're I don't know if I've seen you like, yeah, when you're, I don't know, in places in Atlanta and you're talking about dabbing people up or just kind of being a goofball in that unexpected environment. I think that that's funny. Are there any other like, I don't know, highlights of like, what'd you say you performed in strip clubs?
Oh yeah, I mean Atlanta's the home of like strip club. We're like strip club mecca here, So I performed in one called the Candy Shop that is now closed because I thought comedy would save it. And I mean I walked in there, only white guy in the zip code, looking like the health inspector. Um, I mean it was a vibe. I'll say it was a vibe. I showed up when the flyer said at 8. It started at midnight, so that was a good lesson in the comedy game there. But dude, I've performed anywhere. And I was just talking about this at a show this week. One of the comics was like, "Man, he's like, you should have been robbed so many times." Like me going to these places, I didn't know any better. Like that's another thing from the podcast. The number one piece of advice from comedians has been you got to get on stage. Like at the end of the day, you can practice in front of the mirror, but you never know if it's funny until you get on stage. That's where you really learn. So I've adopted that from the very beginning of my career. And I was on stage every single night, at least once a night. And if I wasn't on stage performing, I was out at a show watching, like a headliner, and learning. And this was like, I mean, I was washing dishes. I was living in the hood of Atlanta in a studio apartment in the basement of this building. Like, I mean, I really like sacrificed a lot, even just to pursue comedy. Like, it really is. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not, and I can tell you, just from doing it 13 years and interviewing people who have been doing it 30 years, like it's a grind the whole time. But if it's something you love and you're passionate about, just like any other professional endeavor, if you love it and you're passionate about it, the work is going to be worth it.
Was there any time throughout this journey, whether you're at the candy shop or anywhere else, where you're like, you know what, this is this is it. This is for me. And like, I don't know, other people have talked about in their forum of like, oh yeah, and I didn't really think it could be anything until, this sort of inflection point. Was there anything like that for you along your way?
I mean, honestly, the first time I did it, I knew this is what I'm doing the rest of my life. I did it. I was about to graduate from college, and I was worried. I was about to have this business degree, and I was like, man, am I going to like pursue this business degree, or am I going to try this comedy thing I've always been curious about but never tried? So I was about to graduate. I was like, well, I might as well do it. I mean, I have nothing to lose, So I tried it, and immediately my brain just shifted into like, oh, I'm a comedian now. I'm doing this forever. So it was always something, since I did it once, that I knew I was going to do the rest of my life. And that's common with comedians. I mean, there's Brian Regan, who's a very successful comedian. He dropped out of college the week of graduation because he did comedy and was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. And he dropped out of school. Like, that's something common with comedians. Is like, as soon as we do it once, we're like, oh, this is it forever.
And doing it once, was that you going to an open mic? Was that you telling a joke? Like, what was the feedback loop there?
Yeah, it was an open mic at a comedy club. There was like 12 people there. Half of them were the staff. And they just politely smiled. I didn't like kill, but it was enough. It was like you're standing up there and people were politely smiling. And it was just enough for me to keep going. I mean, I was buzzing after that. Like you really do get a high from it, and a low when you bomb. It's all on you. So when you kill, you're like, well, of course I'm the chosen one. And then when you bomb, which everyone does, like one of the questions I ask on my podcast is, what's your worst bombing story? Because everyone at every level has just crazy bombing stories. So it's definitely a drug, I will say, but it's also a job. And if I would have earlier in my career, I'm grateful for where I'm at, but that is something maybe if I looked back would be like, well, this is also a job and it is a business, so maybe thinking more of like, okay, yes, let's develop the skill and the craft of comedy, but also like, how can we position ourselves to actually make a living at this sooner?
Right. Yeah. So one of the questions I like to ask on my podcast ever since 45 seconds ago is, what is your favorite bombing story?
A callback. Look at that. Dude, you're a
Callback.
natural, Mitchell. You're a natural.
Dude, I'm taking notes over here.
We
Your
have to
boy's
go on the
taking
road
notes.
together.
Yes.
Yeah, mine, there's so many, but honestly, like, I had a comedy club turn the lights off on me before. It was like, it was a very glamorous show happening at 1 a.m. on a Saturday. And, I still don't think I wasn't bombing. They just weren't laughing. But I swear I wasn't bombing. I thought they were listening. But basically went up there, literally like, this was one of those, I was the only white guy on the show. I go up there, and probably 2 minutes into the set, they're just not feeling it. And apparently the club wasn't feeling it. So they just shut the lights off on me. So I doubled down and said, oh, a black business not paying their light bill. Typical. And then that just, the DJ played like gunshot sound effects. And then he played like this song that I can't really repeat on here, but it was in the vein of, race and all of that. And I literally just walked off stage and then like walked to the door, like left, didn't do any, like just walked off stage and directly out of the building. But then I went back the next week. Like, we're masochists. Like, we just love it. We're just so calloused over years of just standing up there. And what I learned from that experience is like creating connection with the audience. Like, they just weren't, I didn't give them a chance to connect with me. Maybe it was my opener. Maybe it was something that happened previously that I should have addressed or I didn't address. Because I honestly don't even remember the jokes I was doing. Because some nights, dude, comedy is so weird that I've done a show at 8 o'clock that kills, and then I'll do a show at 10 o'clock, same venue, and it completely bombs. Like, the exact same show bombs. So you've really got to learn how to adapt, and really it all comes down to, like, connection. And it comes down to, like we talked about earlier, in just, like, real-world application, laughter's the shortest distance between two people. It can really bring people together. So if you're up there talking and you're not connecting, then they're not going to be receptive to what you're trying to say. So I've had shows where it's like they're not laughing, and I literally just like break the fourth wall, and I'm like, where did I lose you? And like I literally just have a conversation with the audience about like, what happened? How did we get here? Like, you were laughing and then you weren't. Was it this joke? Was it that joke? And it's not funny, but it's interesting, and it's connecting with the audience, and it's being real on stage, and it's just years and years and reps and reps and reps of doing it on stage, where you just pick up a little thing here, pick up a little thing there. And bombing, as you know, failure is the best teacher is a common phrase, and it's very true in comedy that you learn all your best lessons from bombing.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of, if I guess kind of going through that, and then the next time you go, and it's just like, oh, well, at least I didn't bomb. Like, it could just be, an okay set, and then you still have that as a reference point.
Yeah. And I would pick up on, like, I knew I was improving because the bombs were less frequent. So it's like, oh, this week I only bombed 5 out of 7 sets instead of 6 out of 7 sets, or like 4 out of 7. I would like track my progress based on the amount of bombs I were having or weren't having.
What is that a real, like, those numbers, like, about right? Well, like, just starting out, it'd be 6 out of 7 in a week or in a month.
Yeah, like bombing versus doing well.
Yeah.
Or like, yeah, because I would do shows at least one a night. So I mean, I was living on stage. So I mean, yeah,
Wow.
It's early on. It is just a lot of just, what am I doing? And we're always going to be our worst critic. Like, when you listen back to your set, because that's another part of writing, is just reviewing what you've done on stage and things. So sets aren't usually as bad as you think they are when you look back on them, and they're usually not as good either. When you think, oh, I'm superhero of comedy, and you listen back, you're like, well, that was lame, or like, So yeah, it really is that ratio, though. It's like majority of the time is bombing for several years. So everyone listening,
Yeah.
definitely try comedy. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely do
Step
it.
right up. Step right up. One of the things I thought was interesting is, which I don't know. I found this on your LinkedIn. You said that my mission in life is to connect the world one laugh at a time by performing stand-up, hosting events, podcasting, and writing. Oh, my mission in life is also to make my wife happy. I thought that was pretty nice. And do you think about mission and values, or do you just like comedy?
For several years, it was just comedy. Like, it was all just get on stage as much as possible, get on stage as much as possible, get on stage as much as possible. You know, whether that means I'm out at, 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night at this Irish pub where people aren't expecting comedy and I have to be up for work the next day at 7 or 8 a.m. Like, there's a lot of that for several years. And it was just comedy, 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 comedy. And then, show business. Oh, it's also a job and it's a business. And what are you doing this for? Who are you doing it for? Like, what is your mission? What is your vision? Same thing with my podcast. For most of its existence, I was just like, I just want to interview comedians and ask them the questions that I want answers to. Like, my favorite parts of comedian podcasts were when they talked about how they wrote a joke, or when they talked about how they booked this thing or their worst gig. So like, let me just make a show that's all that. So now I'm more mindful about, okay, who is the core audience? How can we create content? How can I ask questions that do serve their interests and things like that? And the same thing with my comedy is what I'm still working on and still learning is, who do I want to be? What do I want to be known for? Who am I creating comedy for? Because I think now more than ever, with comedy's booming. It's all over social media. Every comedian has crowd work clips. Every comedian is posting stand-up clips. And it's like, how can you stand out? How can you differentiate yourself from everything else? So I'm currently working on, like, who am I as a comedian? I know, like what you read on LinkedIn, like, I know at my core, that is my mission and my vision. But now it is like, okay, well, how do you do that? And how do you do that consistently? And how do you do that in a way that actually builds momentum and builds a fan base? That's kind of it's an interesting time to be having this interview with you, because, I mean, I've been a fan of you and your work since we connected during the pandemic. And it is an interesting time now of, like, I've been working in this one direction, and now it's like, okay, but what now type of deal. So I do have that mission and vision in mind, but executing on it in a way that is actually like, oh, my wife sees my followers going up. Oh, and I'm getting booked more. She's like, oh, maybe he is doing it. Maybe taxes will be more pleasant next year. That kind of stuff.
Right. So you have 2 YouTube channels and 2 Twitters. You kind of have like Joel Byars as well as this Hot Breath. We can call them both brands. Mm-hmm. How do you look at having 2 versus just being, one, and kind of the direction that you want to take it?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mitchell. Yeah, I think I am like, I've always tried to be like, okay, well, which am I, Hot Breath or am I a comedian? And what's interesting is that may be ego, that it's like, oh, I need to be 2 separate things. Because honestly, like that corporate gig I booked with doing the joke writing workshop, that was from the podcast. They saw the YouTube channel, thought it was great, wanted to hire me. I've booked festivals because people have seen the podcast. I've booked several gigs because people have seen the podcast. So I have separate things, but I think, especially like when I talk about being an entrepreneur or something, I feel like I need to focus. I feel like I'm putting effort in different directions, and it's really like kind of diluting the effectiveness. And I'm kind of doing a few things okay, but I feel like if I really focus on one thing, then I think it would just, I think like the rising tide raises all boats. I think I need to focus on one thing. And I think my ego has kind of been like, but I'm a comedian. And people need to know I'm a comedian. And I'm really funny, and I've been working at this for a long time, and I do believe in what I'm creating. And I don't know. I'm really at this crossroads right now of, I just started my personal YouTube channel, and I was creating a lot of like dope video essays on there. One of them popped. The rest of them are kind of just there. And I really thought that was like a big bet on myself of like, oh, I'm going to create this dope YouTube channel, and then it's going to be over in a month. I'm on the moon. And the first one of the first few did get, it's like at 150,000 views. And I was like, oh, we got this. And then I just posted one that got 80. So I'm kind of in flux right now on like, well, what am I doing? So Mitchell, tell me what I should do, and I'll do it, man. I'm here for it.
This is good. This is the exclusive behind the scenes. So what you're describing, I think, is like not only for entrepreneurs, but just all people. Like, we have so many options. And I was writing this thing the other day. I was like, not only, I've always admired people like Kobe Bryant because, not only did he have like great work ethic and leadership, he was so like clear on the mission and the vision. And so like, not only is it hard enough to be like, say, a basketball player and be like, I want to win championships. I'm going to wake up. I'm going to do all the things. Like, that is hard. But the only thing harder than that, I think, is not even knowing what the thing is. Because then you have this energy lost of trying to figure out what the thing is and then also chip away at it. So it's like, do I do this YouTube thing in, which channel? Oh, should I go on TikTok? Should I be writing more? Should I be here or there? At least directionally, you're putting your energy into this thing that is comedy around, video and telling stories. And so I think that like acknowledging step one of like, whoa, you found your thing, right? And so like, that's good. That's great momentum. A lot of people don't know that thing yet. And maybe 13 years ago, prior to you getting on that open mic and finding this thing, you might have like a very different trajectory. So like, I think kind of going back to that micro wins concept of like, oh, nice. It's not about, oh, which direction do I go? It's like any of these can work. I'm just going to kind of, go at one at a time and be like, this is the thing right now. That being said, I'm curious, like, what has worked best so far between the YouTube channels or just any of the other stuff that you put out? Like, what has been like disproportionate results sort of thing?
Well, I mean, my podcast YouTube is at like 27,000 subscribers, and my personal is at 2,000. So maybe that's been disproportionately. I guess my ego just wants to be known as a comedian and not just like a comedy teacher or educator type deal. And I enjoy interviewing other people and like promoting them and putting them on a platform and things like that. But I'm also sometimes like, but what about me type deal? So maybe I just need to find more purpose in what I have been doing with the podcast, or like kind of reignite maybe the mission and vision there. Because I think the comedian business model, especially in the social media age, is you perform, you film it, you share it, hope to go viral, and then go out on tour and go on the road. That's kind of like what everyone is doing right now. And I've always, in my career, looked at like what people are doing, and then, all right, that's what's working now, but what's the inverse? So like, even when I released my self-produced comedy special, I was like, oh, okay, everyone's putting it on YouTube. I'm going to sell it on my website and just see what happens. Like, I'm going to do the opposite. And now people are starting to sell comedy specials on their website. And like, my whole goal with the special was to make my money back, which I had, and which I have, and it's still available, joelbyerscomedy.com, for anyone listening. And I guess I don't know, it's just an interesting thing that I feel like I need to pick one thing and then just see it all the way through. I get very excited at shiny objects, but I think it would really help to focus And right now, I would say most of the momentum is with the podcast, really. I'm still booking and doing live shows and I'm out on the road and stuff, but like seems like the most momentum and interest, I get messages every day about the podcast and how helpful it is from all around the world. So maybe leaning all in on that, the bigger that gets, the bigger I get, so it's not one or the other. I need to find like a symbiotic relationship between them.
Do you want feedback?
I want it all, Mitchell. Yo, this is therapy now. I'm going to go lay on my couch and I'll send you my copay after this. But yeah.
Perfect.
I want
Perfect.
to be
That's
honest.
usually how these go. So, I like what you said about, doing the inverse, sometimes of like, okay, what is everyone else doing? Or maybe is there other evidence to do the opposite or to do something stick out? And so I want to revisit that in a second, but I also want to share that we'll stick on that. So perhaps that is true, but also zooming out a little bit more, perhaps you were trying to do the inverse of the inverse, which is like traditionally people had some sort of, okay, you got to get a Netflix special, you got to get this big production sort of thing. Then you put out your thing, your special, and you get known. And then like the Andrew Schultz's or some of these other people were like, yo, what if I just put everything on YouTube for free, grow this massive audience, and then I don't even need that? And maybe we're still in that era where you just want to get distribution through the natural mechanism. And then the other thing is, and so maybe that's not like gating your special. If that's your best work, how do you get the most amount of eyeballs on that for free?
Right. Especially
now once you've made your money back on it. And then the other thing I would think about is like, do you know who Ali Abdallah is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he, for anyone who doesn't know, he was this like doctor, YouTuber. Now he's like a full-time, like he started making videos just about like productivity and medical school. And then now he's like one of the biggest YouTubers on, entrepreneurship and productivity and all these things. He and his team, like one of his biggest lessons, I think last year he made a video about where he wanted to take himself out of the business. His channel is Ali Abdal, and now he's got millions of subscribers and views and this business that he runs, and he's like, oh, this is very dependent on me. How do I just create more so like a brand? They played around with this idea of like creativepreneur, where Ali could be a talking head on it, but he's not the brand. And so they spec'd out all these things, and they were going to launch a second YouTube channel that they spent months on. They finally released it last year, and then like they ended up like scrapping it because it was just too much work when the thing he already had, Ali Abdal channel, was working great. He's like, oh, it's just too much work to do this another one, even with all his recognition. And so it's interesting that he was trying to have what you are starting with that is working, right? He was trying to remove his name from it and just have this overall thing of creativepreneur. But his name was working already. So maybe your thing that's working already is the Hot Breath Comedy podcast. Mm-hmm. And you can certainly be the star of that, as well as like feature other comedians on there. But if it's already working, maybe there's a way to double, triple down on that versus some of these other directions. I don't know.
Yeah, so you would just pick one. You would just go all in on the podcast, basically. You're like, I don't want to prescribe you how to live your life, Joel, but I am interested in your professional opinion, is that?
Yeah, so I was just pulling up the channel in the background. I guess what is the time commitment right now to both? Are they like 50-50?
I mean, I've been all in on my YouTube channel since December. I mean, like all I've done, thought, and breathed about is like my personal YouTube channel, and the podcast. Right now, I used to like book guests and like go interview them in person and like really do well researched interviews. But right now, I'm doing like a weekly live stream with a co-host. And we'll bring people on sometimes, or it's like a weekly Q&A where we'll have guests sometimes. and it's kind of like a car talk for comedy, basically. So I could see it kind of going more in that direction. I just want to make sure the quality is there and the numbers are there, which audio is growing, but the YouTube is actually kind of hit. I think we're still getting subscribers, but like, you know, almost 27,000 subscribers, and like a video will get like 200 views. So there's something disconnected there.
You're talking about on the personal channel,
Or on
the
the Hot
podcast?
Breath personal channel, it was, yeah, I started that probably December. And I love the content there, but I don't think people watch it and then think they want to book me. You know, it's like very well, highly produced video essays, but those videos are almost something that could be on Hot Breath.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, like, the great thing about Hot Breath is it's open. It could be, yeah, it's like video. Your weekly guide to comedy mastery show, like that could be you. That could be like chopping it up with other. That could be the podcast. That could be these stories about Steve Martin or the Andrew Schulz or some of these things. Yeah, I think that just starting you have 14 videos. Yeah, Joel Byars comedy has 2,000 subscribers and 14 videos, whereas Hot Breath has almost 500 videos and almost 30,000 subscribers. So if I were you, I mean, obviously there's like the bias of the sunk cost fallacy of like, oh, well, you have these dope videos on your personal channel. What do you do with those?
I sell them to Hot Breath.
Well, yeah, there you go. Like, I don't know. What if you tested, I mean, one, what's done is done. It's like, just take it. Like, I would structure, if I were you, I would look for a mini experiment to say, what if Hot Breath was the thing? What is the smallest test that I could run to say like, oh yeah, actually, if I did just go all in on here, that would be like ideal outcome for me. And so maybe that's doing, a couple either more podcasts or just like re-uploading one of your most popular, like I don't even know who this fluffy guy is, the Gabriel Iglesias.
Mhm.
That's maybe like he seems to be very popular. Those are maybe that was just timely too. That was 3 years ago, but that that video on both of your channels is the top one.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you could like re-release. I haven't watched. There's an actual interview with him. Yeah, I wonder if you could re-release one of those on the Hot Breath one, and or just structure it where it's like the test is this. You normally were doing what is it? These are all a month ago. You're normally doing like one every month or so. This month call it Q2 test is like I'm just stepping in and telling you what to do.
Yo, I mean, I'm here for it, dude. I need you.
something along these lines. Obviously, feel free to ignore the stuff, but like, what if one of the things I like the phrasing is like, how might I? We do this in like design sprints of like versus just like, what do you do? Or it's like, I don't know what to do, but it's like, how might we and just form a bunch of statements like that. Like, how might I prove one or the one channel is better than the other, or that I could input, say 3 videos a week and output X amount of subs or whatever. And so how might you do that with just a quick test in April or in a given 1 month? Just put all the focus there, and knowing that it might not be, especially with YouTube, sometimes it takes a while, and that's kind of the beauty of having the Hot Breath already set up. But maybe just test. Maybe, I don't know if you're doing much with shorts as well, but maybe that's kind of part of the test where what you're looking for is the repeatable formula, right? Where you take the long form interview, and then from there you cut up a couple shorts and release them both that seems to work for some people, especially if it could be like some of these bigger names.
Yeah, I've definitely, since pursuing the Joel Byars one, like, yeah, Hot Breath has really definitely taken a back seat to, it's kind of something that built and it's like self-sustaining and it has like a real excited, engaged community. So I'm very grateful for that. Maybe I just need to lean all in on that and stop trying to, I tried to pivot and I didn't need to try to pivot, basically.
What does your gut say? What do you think you should be doing?
Whatever makes my wife happy, which is make money. Yeah.
And if she had to, well, I guess remove the money and keep the wife, please. But if you and remove also like say YouTube removed the ability to even see views or monetization, and you're just going to do this for a year, but there's no views, like you can't see the views or anything, like what would you just enjoy the input of for, say you're going to do this 5-10 more years? Or just for 1 year? Keep it simple. Like, what would you enjoy doing more? Hot Breath Comedy, podcasts, connecting with comedians, that sort of thing? Or more like solo episodes, Joel Byars?
Hot Breath. Yeah, Hot Breath. It's more collaborative. There's already momentum there. And I think the thing with me creating video essays is me trying to think of, every comedian is posting stand-up clips and doing X, Y, and Z. I don't want to get caught in that hamster wheel that I have friends that have blown up on social media, but now they're like, oh man, you just film everything, you post crowd work clip, like they're caught on this hamster wheel. It's like, I don't want to get caught up in that, especially how oversaturated it is. So Hot Breath is definitely, I think, still the untapped potential that no one else has a Hot Breath. So yeah, Hot Breath. There you go.
There you go.
There's my $25
Hot Breath
copay.
Comedy.
Thank you for that therapy session.
Yeah, that's hey, I was just here guiding you. You did all the hard work. Joel Byars, everyone. You could catch him on Hot Breath Comedy. You could check, maybe he still puts out videos on his own channel. Check that out too if you're not already subscribed. Joel, where anything else that you want to share with these people, and where can people find you?
Yeah, if people heard this and enjoyed it and want to reach out and please let me know you enjoyed the episode. You could just reach out and say, I loved hearing you on Mitchell's podcast. Or if you'd like to hire me for a corporate event, I'm available as well. All my social media is Joel Byars Comedy, and my website is joelbyerscomedy.com, where you can contact me on there as well if you'd like. And my podcast is called Hot Breath, which, if you're listening to this now, you just heard, I believe, what they call, if we're going to call back, an inflection point in a career, perhaps. So definitely check it out. If you're listening to the podcast right now, it's available on the same app you're listening to this podcast now, Hot Breath, and it's on YouTube as well. Just search Hot Breath, and you'll see it.
Joel Byars, everyone, go check him out. Add some more laughs in your day. Joel and I got probably our quota, and I think I'm good for the rest of the year. Yeah, this has been amazing. Joel, thank you so much for coming on the show, my man.
Thanks for having me, Mitchell.